I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of a Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Hello, and welcome back to a Healthy Push podcast. I have a really special treat for you today, and I couldn't be more excited about this. So, to give you a little background before we jump in, I started my A Healthy Push coaching and community back in April of 2025. And I've had this in the back of my head because, I have my past Panic to Peace students on to share their stories. And now that I've had the community up and running now for several months, I'm like, ooh, it would be so good and helpful and fun to have some of my community members on and share their experience, their journeys, share their recovery stories, just like Panic to Peace, but give that perspective of what it's like to be in the coaching and community. So today I have one of my community members with me, Bella, and I am so freaking excited for you to meet her and hear her story. So, Bella, welcome to Healthy Push Podcast.
Hello. I'm a bit nervous, but I feel like I'm in good hands with you. So I'll just breathe and take it slow. You ask me any questions that you want, and I'll do my absolute best to answer them as well as I'm able to.
I love it. Everyone feels that, right? Like, I don't even care if it's one of my students, but also the expert guests I have on and therapists. People will share, I am a bit nervous. And I'm like, well, of course you are. Like, when's the last time you did a podcast interview? Probably not ever or anytime recently. So it's all good to let all the feelings exist. And yes, you're in great hands. Okay, let's just start. Tell us a little bit about you.
This is always the most hardest question to answer. So I feel like we've started right with the gritty topic. So I'm Bella. I'm based in the UK. I'm in my late 30s. I work in the music industry. I've got my own business. And I'm someone who hasn't really suffered from anxiety up until a few years ago.
Yeah, it's just so nice to sit down with somebody who is like, okay, I have this experience with anxiety. I want to share it and I want to be helpful in any way I can. So there's going to be lots of helpful stuff in here, but let's just start take us back when this sort of started and what did it look like? Because like you said, this is not like you've had a long history with anxiety.
I guess the reality is that as much as when I look back at my early life, I like to think that I didn't have anxiety, I probably had some little twinges in there that were perhaps chaotic or abnormally dealt with. And though I didn't experience like peaks of anxiety or really tough moments, I think that in general, when I had big feelings, I either tried to avoid them or control them, or I had a coping mechanism that just wasn't very healthy. So when I look back on my early life now, I recognize that. But when I was in the crux of anxiety, I didn't really realize it really snuck up on me. And there was quite a lot happening in life all at once. I'd started a business and it's in a really stressful industry. Entertainment is difficult and there's lots of pressures and there's no days off or shut off hours. There was a lot of pressure. I was one of a few women owning a business. I didn't have, a 10-year career doing it. It was all quite new. And I really wanted to do good. I've always been a people pleaser to my detriment. And I've always been someone that's very A-type, so everything has to be done perfectly and everyone has to be happy with my work. So that was one big thing that was happening, but at the same time as that, I'd broken up with a best friend of 15 years, my best girlfriend that I'd had for such a long time. And the relationship ended really badly and cut off out of the blue. And myself and their partner, their husband, were really in loggerheads. And though I remained calm and didn't retaliate, the husband was very aggressive and narcissistic and speaking very badly about me to tons of people. We worked in the same industry. So there was this extra layer of pressure when I was in the throes of starting this new period of my life where I thought I was being judged very heavily by people around me. And as well, I lost my confidence. I lost my best friend and the person that I lent on to for emotional support. And in that situation, I tried to lean on new people for emotional support, and they weren't the right people. They were fun time people, but their coping mechanisms, now you've got to remember I worked in entertainment, were alcohol, drugs, late night partying. And they were all things that were, you know, like most people, I've always had a relationship with alcohol, but I never had a relationship with drugs before that. So I didn't know how to navigate or do those things safely, and it was super chaotic. Those things were going on, but the real cherry on that cake was that I was in a relationship with someone who was, and the relationship was quite new at that point, who was unbeknownst to me because I was at that point only in my kind of late 20s. Was very narcissistic, very controlling, but did it in such a subtle way that bit by bit, they kind of broke me down from a confident, happy, free, inspired individual to someone who was beyond petrified of leaving their own, y- their own living room or their own house by themselves. And it kind of all crescendoed and everything fell to the ground all at once. And now I can reflect, and when I look back, I noticed that avoidance behaviors started slowly creeping in bit by bit. I notice now when I look back that, for example, I stopped driving on the motorway. But in my mind, I was doing that just because I was so stressed and, going the back way would be easier. And if I needed to take a busy phone call, I could pull over. And I had all of these excuses for it. And then it was that I would only drive on certain types of roads with someone in the car, that I would only get a train if someone took me to the train station, that if I had to go to a stressful meeting, I'd have a drink before it. And all of these things just got heavier and heavier, more and more chaotic. And there was so much just intense pressure on me from all angles. And like I said, at home life was really bad. The boyfriend that was really controlling, who would used to reiterate this narrative that I wasn't safe on my own. So if I wanted to go to the shops, he would say, "I'll go with you. You're not safe on your own." Or if he was away and he would get a friend to come and pick me up, to drive me to the gym, to take me out for dinner, to do all of those things. And he would constantly verbalize, "You're not safe on your own. You're not safe on your own. You're not safe on your own." And so all of these things were happening all at once, and bit by bit, my I guess the bricks of my foundation all started to crumble down. And I was starting to have a lot of panic attacks. It went from being maybe one a week to one a day to two a day to a point where they were just pretty much rolling. And I really had no control over myself. I would be sitting shaking, I couldn't concentrate, I wouldn't be able to speak. I was avoiding all sorts of relationships and friendships and really focused on doing this work thing and concentrating on that. And then any free time that I had, I would be drinking alcohol, taking party drugs, out 24 hours a day, not sleeping, not eating, smoking a ton of cigarettes. And then one day I woke up really early. I got a couple of messages from somebody about some work stuff. And then the moment happened, the real breaking point. And I I can't even explain it because I don't think I've got the vocabulary to explain the feeling. But it felt like everything inside me just completely broke and stopped all of a sudden, and I couldn't communicate. Like, I literally couldn't speak anymore. And now I understand that what happened was I got stuck in a moment of psychosis, in a moment that was such high panic that that everything in me just turned off, and I didn't have the ability to regulate myself whatsoever. My friend called an ambulance. The paramedic came, sat with me for 4 hours, and I was in such a state I couldn't even get into the ambulance to go to the hospital because I was so scared of just leaving the sofa and having my friend away from me. And then following that, I guess that was the height, that moment. And then following that, it was the journey back up from the pits of hell, as I would describe it, which has been a
Yeah.
long and arduous and very bumpy ride.
So this moment, like this breakdown, happened about 6 years ago.
It happened just a few months before COVID, actually. Yeah, so about 5, 6 years ago.
What timing? And I mean, so much of this makes sense, right? And I'm sure looking back now, you can see it like you're running a business, you are in this unhealthy relationship, you're not really taking care of yourself in the best ways. And sort of your body was finally like, nope, I can't do this anymore. And I can imagine how incredibly scary that was, especially if you have never had, like, such an intense panic attack like that. So, when this happened, the ambulance is called, you get through this, but, of course, this is gonna leave a pretty massive effect after, and I think that's where you were going with this, right? Like,
Yeah.
started to have some avoidance behaviors and really, like, this super intense fear and lack of trust in yourself. So, I wanna hear more, of course, but it's like, what happened after that event?
Well, the reality was that was the moment when I again, it's really hard to describe these things because unless you've experienced them, there is no way for another person to fully understand. And as much as people want to be empathetic and think they understand because they've had a panic attack or because they've experienced anxiety when they've had to do public speaking or go to a job interview, the disordered panic and for me, I was later diagnosed with PTSD, is on another level in terms of fear. It almost feels like it's inhuman. It's kind of like you're inside a film in that very scary moment of a horror film, but you can't get out of it. And so from that moment where I had that, there's kind of the episode of psychosis around the panic, I was a completely changed person. From that moment onwards, I literally couldn't be left alone. I had to move in with my friend who is I can't even explain my gratitude and thanks. They're just a real life angel. Moved in with them immediately and they looked after me for some weeks. But I wasn't just like a free person within their home and they were spending time helping me rest and recoup. It wasn't that at all. It was they had to sit with me 24 hours a day, lay next to me in bed. I couldn't eat a meal. I couldn't make a sentence. I was shaking constantly. If they left the room and left my side for some minutes, I would roll back into another really intense panic attack. I was in such a state, they weren't able to pop to the shops or go for a drive. They also couldn't do anything because my need to have something create some safety around me was just so high. And from that, I mean, that was weeks that went on for. Eventually, they convinced me to have a doctor's appointment because until that point, I had never even sought any assistance for anxiety because I didn't know that I had it, and I definitely didn't know I had a panic disorder or PTSD or anything like that. And at this point, I was just so lost and confused. The doctors, unfortunately, weren't much help, and they said I had the choice of, and this was after a 15-minute session, the choice of antidepressants or I could have a beta blocker. Again, massively panicked in the doctor's office because I had no idea what either would do to me. And at that point, I was too afraid to have anything or try something new because I already felt so bad and the potential of it getting worse. So went for the beta blocker because they had described that that would just stop the top end of the panic. Following that, some other friends got involved and rallied in to help me. And in their helping me, they found me a therapist called Claude, and he was just like in those moments, the pit of the original traumatic moments, I suppose. He was incredible. He was a really old guy in his 80s and he did old school EMDR and he wouldn't talk about what would happen. He completely refused to. And all his focus was, he specialized in PTSD and his focus was just reducing the panic and the anxiety just enough that then I could start to just engage in normal life, I suppose. I saw him for a good few months. And when I had finished my sessions with him, I actually got cleared of PTSD. So I guess, I don't know, I'm not quite sure what the monitoring system is called, but I basically didn't register as having PTSD after some months, which was great and amazing. And I'm thankful for that. But I was still on medication and I still had all the symptoms of agoraphobia and I still had no coping mechanisms, no healthy coping mechanisms for anxiety. And I didn't really understand how to navigate this new phase of my life.
Yeah. It's so amazing that you had such amazing friends and support and people who really like rallied around you and was like, okay, we're going to help you through this and getting you access to that therapist, right? And doing EMDR, which is something that is incredibly helpful for PTSD, among other things. But your story is a little bit uniquely different in that there was this really major event that overwhelmed your system. It was too much and really is that definition of PTSD, right? And so after that, you developed, of course, a lot of these fears and a lot of these behaviors. So, like you said, going through therapy was super helpful, right? Allowed you to process a lot of that trauma, but you still didn't feel like I really have a solid understanding of like why I'm experiencing the panic, why the agoraphobia, like why or how to move through it, right? So, what do you do at that point where you're like, okay, there's still so much that I'm missing?
I guess after that first layer of the, what should we call it? The onion skin of anxiety was removed.
Yeah.
But the first crispy brown layer came off and I shook that off. I was kind of left with all of these layers of unknowing and not really understanding how to navigate through it. So I think I did what pretty much anyone would do and try absolutely everything that was available. I did hypnotherapy, I did mindful coloring in at home, I did, oh my gosh, so many things. I tried loads of different types of therapy and therapists, and nothing really moved the dial. No one really understood. And to be truthful, most of the people that I spoke with didn't really understand what agoraphobia was, particularly because with that, I didn't have social anxiety. So I could still communicate with them really well, and I wasn't in the moment of the session having a panic attack. But after the session, I couldn't walk to the car by myself, couldn't drive myself, couldn't get on a train, couldn't attend a meeting, couldn't do a doctor's appointment, like absolutely nothing without someone with me 24 hours a day. I had a couple of good experiences with therapists and people that helped me along in my journey. At one point, I was working with an exposure coach, which was really good. And we did a lot of things mostly remotely. But for me, there was something missing in that. It was great to do the exposures and, Monday to Friday, we walk to the end of the road. Saturday and Sunday, we try something bigger. And then back on Monday, we go just right back to the beginning, walk to the end of the repetition and someone pushing you through those reps was really good. It was really frustrating that doing something 5, 10, 15, 20, 5,000 times, it often felt like I still felt the same. And I was still absolutely, completely petrified of having a panic attack or getting stuck in another psychotic moment or being unable to get help or being too far from home or, all of these different things, the list of things I was fearful of. That went on for a couple of years, just endless hoping and hoping to find some magical cure or the right person that would tell me this magical thing or have this, I don't know, just something that they could do differently, that they could do for me that would just make it all go away, and that didn't happen. And alongside that portion, I still had some trauma that needed to work its way out. I did see a psychotherapist who was incredible, and we worked together for about a year. And the reason he was so incredible was because he really put me through my paces in terms of the trauma therapy. He tore everything apart, even all the childhood stuff that I thought was completely unrelated. And he rebuilt me through all of those things so that now the only things I have left to deal with is that rebuilding my confidence and going out there and doing more things. He was also great because he broke all of the rules that there should be in a normal therapy session. He often left the session to accompany me to do things like get on a train, like go for a walk in town. And after about a year of working together, we did something completely out of therapy norms. And I drove from the UK to France with him in the car,
Whoa.
which is extraordinary. And when we got to France, I'd kind of believed that we would be able to do that, or that I would be able to do it. And I remember pulling off the Eurotunnel. I'd driven my own car, and he was sitting as passenger. We drove off the side of the Eurotunnel, and he said, "Right, where are we going to go next?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never driven to France before. I've never even driven on the other side of the road before. And I just hadn't planned that we'd got this far." So we made it all the way to France and ended up just doing a quick circuit and having lunch and driving back. But that was a monumental achievement. And that really gave me a huge amount of confidence. But I guess still the bottom line of it all was still that I hadn't changed my relationship with anxiety. And I was still relying a lot on other people or another person to give me an extra layer of safety and support through it all.
Of course, because you had such a lack of distrust because of so many things that you experienced, right? And I think you did what so many people do. You just try anything and everything. And you're like, there's got to be something, right? Something's got to be able to help me and make this go away. And that unfortunately causes you, right, to not really look at your relationship with anxiety and working to make that healthier. But I think something that's really important in this to mention is the perfectionism, right? Because I think you, like so many others, you really do adopt this mindset of like, I can do this, right? I can push through this. Just tell me what to do. Like, and oftentimes it does lead us to exposure therapy when maybe we're not ready for it, or we're not in the best place to do it, or we're just doing that forcing and we don't really understand why we're doing exposure therapy. So, this is where people can often find that to be really unhelpful, right? Like you said, like I'm walking down the street 25,000 times and I've done it, but I still don't feel safe. Like I still feel that anxiety and that fear. So this is why I talk so much, right? It's so important to look at your relationship with anxiety and really work on that. And that's not entirely doing exposure work. And that might not be the first, second, third, fourth, fifth step. But I love how you, like myself, were like, I'm going to keep going, right? I'm going to keep pushing. Might not have always been in the healthiest way, but I think it does lead you to the place that you inevitably have to arrive at of like, okay, I've got to actually look at my relationship with anxiety and I can't just keep going and pushing and like thinking that this is going to solve everything. I mean, massive, right? This drive that you did after this, what did things look like? Because I know it's not like, oh, I did that drive and then everything's fixed and I'm cured and I don't have any problems anymore.
After the drive, everything just went, it didn't shrink back to normal, but it went back to how it was before, because without the therapist in the car with me, I wasn't able to do those things myself or even get half of the way by myself. I still struggle to drive more than a few miles from the house by myself. So me being able to drive to a Eurotunnel, spot, check in, get my passport out, drive onto a two-story metal train that goes underneath the channel into a different country. And then these are all things that are way out of the realms of possibility for me to manage by myself, even now. But I think that's been the biggest thing for me, the frustration over the last year of being able to achieve so many things, but those achievements have been made with other people by my side. And I think that it led me to inevitably look at my relationship with anxiety. And even when you say something like that, that wording makes like, I don't know, like the hackles on me like stand on end, and it frustrates me because I don't want a relationship with anxiety. And it's frustrating to think that I need one, and I need to have one, and I need to have a healthy one, because ultimately my dream would be that I never have any level of anxiety ever again. Because to me, it's like, it's just abhorrent. I want it as far away from me as possible. Yeah, just
Yeah.
interesting that I still have that like visceral reaction to someone saying something so obvious.
Of course. It's so hard when you've been struggling with the disordered anxiety for so long. And when somebody says, like, you have to develop a relationship with it, like, this is not something we can make go away. We think of that disordered anxiety, right? Like, I don't want the anxiety that's screaming at me. I don't want the anxiety that makes it hard to be by myself, to drive, all those things. And I'm not talking, right, creating the healthy relationship with disordered anxiety, but we've got to create a relationship with anxiety as an emotion and start to really treat it more like we do all of our other emotions, because we've got to have a relationship with sadness and anger and happiness and joy. Otherwise, what would life look like, right? So I can see and totally understand how that makes you feel like, ugh, I don't like that. Which I'm sure many people listening are like, yeah, I'm with you, Bella. Like, totally agree on that.
I was gonna say it's really interesting. The times when I've relaxed into the possibility or been okay with thinking that there may be anxiety in part of a journey or part of doing something, I haven't experienced any anxiety at all. So I'll give you an example if it's helpful. So now, like I haven't taken medication now for many years. I could do tons of stuff on my own, go to the gym, go to the shops, like have absolutely no anxiety at home, go and do meetings, all sorts of different things. But my life is still limited in lots of different ways, and it isn't yet in the place where I want it to be. But as an example of where the improvement is since I've been part of the community, for the last couple of years, I've been invited to go to a ball up in London near Christmas time. And it's just been something that I can't even the thought of it would spiral me and make me feel really anxious and panicky. Last year was the closest I got to going, where I agreed to go and then pulled out a day or 2 days before. Though really, I knew that I was never going to go because I never bought a dress, hadn't made any plans, didn't even look up the menu, all of the things. This year, the ball date was set in the diary. I bought a dress. I actually bought 4 or 5 different outfits, and then I had to, choose which one I was gonna wear in the end. Bought the outfits, planned, took a look at the menu, looked up where it was, and then on the day, experienced no anxiety, got in the car, we drove up to London. There was tons of traffic, grew in the car for probably 2.5, 3 hours. This is right in central London in Park Lane, which is one of the busiest places in London. It's just before Christmas, so there's a billion people in the road, like on the road, driving and out and about. Got to the hotel where this huge ball was. It was up several flights of stairs. It was in a huge ballroom. Typically, the table that I was sitting on was right the other side of the room through almost, I think, probably close to 1,000 people. Um, I sat down. I enjoyed the whole evening. There was not a single moment of panic, no moments of anxiety whatsoever throughout the whole evening, and I loved it all. Driving home again took another hour and a half, and it was just a normal, wonderful experience, similar to what I would have had the years before I had anxiety. And it's just really interesting that some of my thinking, sometimes now there's something in me which it kind of holds me back from doing things which I am capable of doing now based on all of the tools and support that I've got. But it's interesting when I just relinquish to the fact that, do you know what? I might be anxious during this. This could go really bad. If I panic, I'm going to panic. But when I relinquish myself to those possibilities, they don't happen. And then it's an enjoyable,
Right.
pressured experience.
Yeah, because you're letting go of that control, right? And you're really leaning into the uncertainty of it all. It's when we fight it, right? When we try to resist it. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be anxious. I want to make sure I'm not going to panic. I want to make sure nothing bad is going to happen. Like, we push up against it so hard. And that's when we make our experience so much more difficult than it needs to be. And not saying that's easy, right? Like, letting go of that control, but it's so freeing when you're like, "Okay, like, we're gonna go. Maybe there's gonna be anxiety, maybe there's gonna be panic, and we'll deal with it if that happens." Like, that is so incredibly powerful. I love how you just, like, very steadily dropped, like, "I am able to be home and drive to shops and, like, do all these things with no anxiety now," because people are probably like, "What?" I think, this for you, right, and many people, it's this lack of self trust, this distrust within yourself that gets built over time. And we don't realize how hard it is to get that back, to cultivate that when it's been taken from us and slowly been, chipped away at. And this is the work that you've been doing, right? And it's incredibly challenging because when you've been given these messages, right? You need me, like you can't be by yourself, you're not safe. And then you have these experiences that feel really unsafe in your body. Of course, this is going to take time to process and work through and to unlearn and to wire these new pathways that say, okay, actually, Bella, you can be by yourself and you can go to the gym and you can drive and do these things and be safe, even if you feel anxious, right? Even if you have a panic attack. So I don't want to gloss over because I think people listening, you've come a really long way. And yes, it is incredibly frustrating to still have some of the thoughts, right? Some of the feelings and some of those limitations, but it takes time to chip away at that and to continue to build that trust that allows you to say, to heck with all the limitations, right? To heck with all the restrictions, and I'm just going to live and do what I want to do.
For me, I spent 32 years of my life with no limitations. I traveled a lot on my own. In fact, I probably did more than most people. The first flight I took on my own was from the UK to the States when I was 10 years old,
Wow.
without a parent, no adult that I knew with me. So the transition from a life of complete freedom without having to think about an option out all of the time, or without thinking, oh, that's gonna, if I get there, will I be able to get home? Without those limitations. Life without those limitations is beautiful, and you don't really take it for the blessing that it is when you're in it. It's just normalcy. So even now, though, I recognize and celebrate the fact that I've made had lots of achievements and made lots of improvements in the last 5 years. I, of course, am not where I want to be, because where I want to be is back to complete freedom.
Here's Bella, the perfectionist.
Yeah. I don't know how long it's going to take for me to get there, but I know that I'm resilient. So I will just keep pushing until I eventually get there, whether it's another week, a month, a year, 10 years. I don't think I would ever be truly happy in myself without that complete freedom back, because I need it. I deserve it. I've worked so hard for it. So I have to get there eventually.
Yeah, and you will. It's like, we want this concrete, like, when is it going to happen? Tell me when it's going to happen. What exactly am I going to have to do? What is it going to look like? And that's just part of the letting go of the control, right? And letting yourself be in that unknown and continuing to go with that belief that you have of like, I am resilient. I know that it's going to happen. And I'm just going to keep living in today, right now, and doing the things that I know are going to be helpful to get me there. But unfortunately, it isn't, right, this marathon and, like, you can see the finish line and you just gotta run a little bit more, like, I swear sometimes if we could see that and if we knew what the journey would look like, we often wouldn't run it, like, we wouldn't do it, right? I'm sure if you could go back and somebody told you all the stuff that you'd have to go through in order to get to where you are now today, you'd be like, "Oh, hell no, like, I don't wanna do that," right? But I think it's so worth mentioning. We often do this comparison, right? Or just this reflectiveness where we look back and we're like, but I used to be able to do XYZ. Like I used to be so carefree. I used to just get in the car and go. I used to travel. I used to be super independent. And it's like, yes. And that just shows that you are incredibly capable of that. And that hasn't gone anywhere. Unfortunately, it just got buried down a bit by these experiences. But you're working to uncover that. And I think, it's really important to recognize, like, let's just give an example. I'm so bad with this stuff, because you're in my community and you hear my terrible analogies. But like, say if you got into a car accident, right? And it was bad and it was really traumatic. There's gonna be a lot of time, right? And dedication and some steps you've got to take in order to build that trust back within yourself and being in a car and being in that space like that made you feel so overwhelmed, so anxious, so scared. So it's like, this is no different. I know we want to make the mental health stuff different of like, I should just be there, right? And I should just be able to do all that stuff again. But it's like your body went through something traumatic and incredibly hard. And it's just like anything else, right? In life, if we experience a car accident or I don't know, we get bit by a dog, like all the like I can't think of good stuff off the top of my head, but it's like if we have these major events happen, we have to recognize, right? This is going to take some time to build self-trust back, to build safety, and to allow ourselves to uncover those pieces that are still very much there. We got to do some work to get there. And it's frustrating as hell, right? Like fair, totally fair. But I think those narratives that we tell are so incredibly unhelpful of like, but yeah, Bella, you used to be able to do this, you used to be able to do that. And it's like, yeah, and you had these really incredibly hard experiences, and we have to account for that too. We can't just say, oh, you used to be able to do this and everything was so wonderful. It's like, okay, well, like, we got to give some grace, right? We got to let yourself be a little bit more human in this.
Yeah, and also I think the important thing as well is for me to, when I reflect back or when anyone reflects back on the phase of their life before anxiety or before trauma or before whatever, it's always really helpful for me to reflect back on some of the negatives too. For example, I had absolutely no healthy coping mechanisms, zero zilch, not a bean. Whereas now, all of my coping mechanisms are healthy, every single one of them. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I'm a completely sober person, I have been for years. I would have never had the opportunity to be this version of myself with that good part, that good part of me shining if I didn't have the traumatic experiences, if I didn't have to have a period of time where I suffered with PTSD and panic disorder. So as well as all of the, looking back through rose-tinted glasses, pretending or imagining or, thinking that life was better before, to some respect, to some level, it absolutely was because I had layers of freedom which I don't have at the moment and I'm working towards. But also there were layers of darkness which were really unhelpful. Lots of controlling behaviors, and perfectionism, which I forced on myself, which I've had since I was a child, which I now just don't have at all. Lots of really negative, unhelpful, destructive thought patterns, really blameful and shameful thoughts about myself in different situations. Again, I don't have those anymore. So as much as I like to look back and think that the before was perfect, logically and honestly, I know that it wasn't. And I'm hoping that if everything does go to plan and I keep working towards being the freer version of myself that I want to see and can get back to traveling and doing all of those wonderful things, that armed with all of the good emotional skill set that I now have will create the perfect version of me that I'm looking for. I'm saying perfect in jest. Nothing and no one's perfect, but perfect in inverted commas version of life that I want to see, one that I deserve to live.
Yeah, you're so right. This reflectiveness of the hardships build that growth, right? And you've had so much internal growth, like this relationship with yourself is so much stronger and you're so much more supportive. And that is not small, that is really massive. And I think a lot of people in general, not just relating to an anxiety disorder, are walking around with not a whole lot of self trust. And there's a lot of people out there, right? You don't want to do things by yourself. You tend to lean into doing things with other people. You feel really uncomfortable. You have layers of shame. You have traumas, right, that you don't want to look at. And all of this stuff, kind of the beauty in it, I hate to say, because there is beauty in it, that it really does allow you to open this relationship with yourself and see, I have to make this better and I want to because I can have a more beautiful life, right? And I think the anxiety disorder stuff really causes you to have more awareness and really cultivate a much better relationship with yourself than you've ever had before. I know it definitely did for me. So, okay, I'm curious. When you joined, I don't know exactly when did you join at the yeah, you joined in April, like when I opened the community. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Like where were you at then and how has the community been helpful for you?
So At that point, I'd wrapped up my psychotherapy and I wasn't having any support no professional support from anywhere. I still had lots of support and comfort from friends and family, so that was great. But obviously, I'm not yet at the end of the journey, and I knew I needed to do some more things or have some more help. But I didn't really know what I needed that to look like. I was confident that I didn't need to continue in like formal therapy where you sit for an hour in a week and churn through loads of stuff. And I was confident that I didn't need exposure therapy or strict exposure therapy again because I tried that and it hadn't really worked out in the way I wanted it to. I just felt like I needed something, but nothing too like tight and controlled and formal. Up until joining the community group, I actually hadn't ever spent time or really spoken to anyone who had agoraphobia before. So that's interesting because, you won't get out a lot.
Yeah.
So I'd been following your page for a while, the same as lots of other people who experience anxiety or panic disorder do. I probably followed about 50 different pages and people who spoke about like support for panic and anxiety. I saw this pop up. I saw the option of the community pop up. I wasn't ready to do a panic to peace course. Again, I didn't feel like I wanted to be like in a formal session. Joined the community, started taking the weekly sessions, posting in the groups, and just finding quite a lot of, I guess the best way to describe it is in the community, you get a lot of support from your peers, but it's really hard to describe because it's not like a practical support. It is an emotional comfort and support, but it's slightly removed. So there isn't the level of burden which you can feel as somebody with a mental health condition. Sometimes it feels as though you're putting a burden on your friends and family when you're always talking about anxiety or panic, or when you're always trying to celebrate a small win of being able to get to the shops or walking around the block on your own or things like that. And it was just this wonderful, safe space where I could have that comfort and support and share wins with people who understood that and wanted to celebrate it without any shame on my part or without any judgment on theirs if I wasn't able to do something. And the community group is really, really supportive. Every single person in the group is on their own journey and at different stages in it, but disregarding that, they're warm, friendly, welcoming, super supportive, and really championing for the group to just succeed and just get through it together. I have the weekly sessions which I join, which of course you lead. To be honest with you, they've been the most helpful for me because I think most of the things that I've done before require me to be very vulnerable, or like in a therapy session, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? You're getting asked a question, you're digging through your trauma, trying to find an answer, hoping that that answer then takes the plug out of the bath of panic that you're trying to drain. But these sessions aren't like that. As a community group, we choose the topic or start to choose the topics that we most need support in. And then you talk through with us some helpful and practical ways to navigate the things that we're struggling with. And it's just, honestly, sometimes when you say things in the group, I can't even get over how simple and obvious they are sometimes. The one that always sticks out for me is when you were talking about, and it's come up a lot of times actually, but as a group of people, we try to compartmentalize all these different parts of anxiety, DPDR, fast beating heart, shaky palms, sweating, all of these different things, and we try and make them into different singular items to tackle. And you just simplified it completely by just reminding me that it's all just anxiety. It's all the same thing. We don't need to keep working on each tiny little part of it and trying to make it a bigger thing than it is in reality. So there's been loads of like really beautiful little nuggets which stick in my mind. There's handouts as well at the end of each session, which I find personally really helpful because it means that then I can enjoy the session and be like fully present in it. And then at the end, I can reflect back on some of the important I guess, like the headline notes and topics and things that I need to reflect on and work through during the week. And the one that's been most helpful for me was a handout that you did about comfort zones. And for some reason, that particular one is one that I look at most frequently. And I guess for me, it's given me a lot more confidence and and encouragement just having that handout and being able to review it and reflect on it in my own time. And then after you've done your part, we're all welcome to kind of join in and share our thoughts or things that are going on in that week or any worries or concerns we've got in particular. And it's so nice because in those moments, even though you're leading the session, there's the opportunity for all of us to give comfort and thoughts and feedback to the person who's sharing their part of the story, which is honestly invaluable because, to be honest with you, every single person in the group should be a qualified therapist because we've gone through more therapy and session and hours of therapy than most people would ever dream to. So it's great. It's been wonderful for me.
Yeah, I'm so glad for your honesty and saying that you found the coaching to be the most helpful because I knew when I created it, I was like, I can't create just a community. Like, don't get me wrong, communities are so incredibly powerful for that connection piece. Like, we don't heal in isolation, we heal in connection. And so that's such an important piece of the community. But I didn't want it to be this place, right, where people are coming just to like share or vent or seek reassurance. Like, I feel like I do moderate it that it's very healthy and, it's not just the weight that you can feel in some communities, but the coaching piece I knew would be so incredibly valuable because, like, I know that's what I was looking for. Like, I did so many years of therapy, but if I could have just had every week somebody speaking to me, right, and saying, okay, this is something that you need. We're going to sit down and talk about it. And I'm going to give you some practical, actionable steps that you can take. And like, I'm going to support you and like check in and see how things are going. Like, you need both of those pieces, right? You can't just have a community without getting the support piece, and I think that's a lot of times what the communities are lacking. So, yeah, like Bella was saying, every Monday, we sit down and I teach on a subject, and we, typically have at least a half hour, 40 minutes where we just chat and, like, talk and offer support, and that's the beautiful part where you see the community come together and they're just so kind and compassionate and helpful. And I'm just so happy that it's been so helpful for you because I do think a lot of people land in this place like you have, where it's like, okay, I kind of feel like I've reached my end with therapy and there are things I've tried that haven't been helpful. Like, let me look outside the box a little bit. And something like this, where you get the coaching and the community, the connection piece is so incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it's honestly been invaluable for me. And I think that at this stage of my journey with panic and agoraphobia, I don't think there would be anything better suited for me. Even the fact of if I miss a session, I can just go and watch it on catch up. It's really helpful for me, and I can go and review things and go back to topics which are really important for me. And sometimes we'll be talking about things as a group, and we did a session not so long ago. Um, and it was really interesting because there were so many people in the group that found it valuable, and it was a valuable session. But for me, it was all of the things that had been going on for me 6 months or 12 months ago. But I still wanted to stay and be part of the session because it was good for me to have those things as a refresher to listen to, but also feel that, I guess, encouragement within myself that I'd passed through, I guess, one part or one portion of it, and I didn't need that support for this particular area anymore.
Which is also such that's like whenever I start the panic diffuse program and we start slowly moving through it, and you can see, okay, wait, I have come a lot further than I thought. And like, I no longer struggle with this. And we'll talk about things, and people will say, like, I just feel so bad, right? That people are struggling with this. And I was there and I totally get it. And so that's such another nice piece, too, right? To have people at all different stages of their recovery and can offer that hope and that inspiration of like, it does get better, right? And you're not always going to be here. And that's such another really helpful piece, too.
I really recognize that because as much as there's some people within the group who are achieving more freedom than I am able to at the moment, there's also some people in the group who are really suffering at the moment, and completely housebound or close to housebound, which I absolutely was just a few years ago. So hopefully as a community we can support them through it as well. And I think it's, it's I think giving, as you mentioned, with the connection, having an opportunity for me to give back and help somebody else in their journey has been something that's given me a lot of comfort, actually. I think when you're suffering with panic and agoraphobia, you can often feel like a burden and that you're taking a lot from people. You're taking things from people around you all the time. You're taking their time, their attention, practical stuff. You need so much support. So having an opportunity to offer support and practical advice and encouragement to other people who are at an earlier stage of their recovery has been a really beautiful thing for me to be able to do.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. It's so amazing when we get together every Monday and it's like often the same faces, right? And we're just connecting and talking. And you can see like how far so many people have come. And I know like you just did the comparison, right? That there are some people taking these really big steps and getting a lot of freedom, but I don't think any of it's comparative because it's like how long have some of those people been struggling and how long have they been working toward recovery and healing? And like, we don't always know all the pieces, right? I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's so easy to be like, oh, that person's doing all the things I want to do, right? And it's like, yeah, but how long did it take, right? And how much effort? And we often don't see a lot of that because we don't share a lot of that. So I mean, you've done such an incredible job and you've worked through some really hard stuff, and I am just so proud of you for continuing to show up and continuing to, like, support yourself and support others while in your own recovery journey, and so I'm just so happy and grateful that you came on and shared your story, and I'm so grateful that you're a part of the community.
Thank you. No, that means a lot. That's really kind of you. And yeah, I feel like the community is a beautiful space. And I hope that more people get the opportunity to be part of it.
Yeah, I say every week when I come on, it's like one of my favorite things to do because I just get to connect and hang out with you guys, and you guys are like would be friends in real life. It just sucks that we all live in very different locations. Well, I will see you soon in the community, Bella, but I am so grateful to you and thank you again for coming on and sharing.
Thank you.
I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.